We're going to talk today about a product called eOne SmartConnect. There we go. So what is eOne SmartConnect? SmartConnect is essentially a tool that allows you to integrate data between systems. eOne's current tagline for the product is connect anything to anything. And having worked with SmartConnect for some years now, I can definitely attest to that. It's an awesome tool for moving data between systems, automating imports of data, exports of data, and not just for Great Plains. Some examples of the applications that we can use to integrate data, some of the more popular ones, the Microsoft Dynamics Great Plains, Microsoft Dynamics 365. Some people refer to that as CRM still. SQL Server, pretty much any other database server that you can think of. We're not limited to SQL Server. Microsoft Office products such as Excel and Word, text files, whether they be flat files or fixed length files. Some of the new advancements in SmartConnect even allow us to connect to cloud-based systems that you don't necessarily have local on your network. It could be HR systems, rental packages that run on a server elsewhere. Microsoft Dynamics is actually a good example of a cloud-based system. And we'll get into more detail of that in a minute. Let's talk about the old way of integrating data into Great Plains. And this holds true for a lot of pieces of software, but we deal with Great Plains on a daily basis, so this is a good place to start. So the old way of getting data into Great Plains from an external system, first have to launch Great Plains. You launch this tool called Integration Manager. You have to figure out how to collect your data, whether it's getting it from a file, usually a text file, hopefully a CSV file, because if it's not a CSV file, you end up chasing your tail for a good bit. If that needs to connect to something in Great Plains, you have to get SQL involved and try and marry that data together. You have to figure out if Integration Manager has an endpoint. Is there a place to put this data into my Great Plains setup, my Great Plains transaction, extender fields, wherever the data needs to go? Does Integration Manager support that? It looks like it does. Okay, well, let's add a map. Let's hope for the best. Let's drag a bunch of stuff around and let's try it. You run the integration. The integration makes the Great Plains window disappear. You usually have to wait a little while because it's a slow process. And then hopefully you don't get any errors. If you get an error, you half the time you're left scratching your head and trying to figure out, okay, well, what did I do wrong? This message I'm getting back is kind of cryptic. Well, let me start over. You need to grab data from CRM, web solutions, third-party platforms. Probably not. Probably not going to be able to do that easily without some type of additional programming or work on the other side of that fence. Now, once you've got the integration going, most times it runs. Sometimes it won't. It's old technology, so kind of, as one of those lines says, add a map and hope for the best. So using SmartConnect simplifies that whole process greatly. You can source your data from just about anywhere, just about anything you can think of. I've had some real challenges thrown at me from people wanting to integrate systems outside of Great Plains into things like sales order processing, or accounts receivables, project accounting, and I've yet to find something that I couldn't get SmartConnect to connect to. So once you've got your data source, you pick your destination. Way more endpoints than you have with something like Integration Manager. You don't have to go direct to a SQL table. If you're going into Great Plains, your data on the window visually looks very similar to the terminology you're used to working with inside the software. You drag and drop your fields that you want to integrate. You click Run. You get a full progress bar. You get detailed error messages, which most of the time aren't super cryptic. And beyond that, there's a whole host of robust troubleshooting tools in case the integration does fail and you need to do some troubleshooting. Another one of the benefits of SmartConnect is the aspect of automation. If you've ever worked with Integration Manager, you know that trying to automate Integration Manager is next to impossible. In the old days, there was a couple products that attempted to do that for you. Those have not been maintained. It's a very difficult process. SmartConnect supports a robust scheduling and monitoring environment. You don't have to be in the software for this to run after it's been set up. There's a service that runs on your server and kicks off the maps at your scheduling times, and these can be recurring. It's not just a one-shot deal. You can flow between multiple maps. Say you had a file that had customer information along with invoice information. You could set up an integration in SmartConnect. It first looks at that data, figures out if a new customer needs to be created in Great Plains, create that customer, and then create the transactions and sales order processing for that particular invoice. And you'd have a full record of that whole process taking place. You can also integrate data based on triggers and actions from within your application. Say in CRM, after a customer books an appointment, you can have SmartConnect trigger on that action to pull data down from CRM and import it into something like Great Plains, create a new customer, create an invoice after an appointment. There's so many options with triggering and actions to automatically run those integrations. We have the ability to manipulate files and data before we try and integrate it into the host application. And by that, I mean that your data doesn't need to look like it's supposed to look like when it lands in your application. Maybe you have abbreviations for a certain field that you need to bring in. Well, you can manipulate that data inside SmartConnect, inside of a map, to say if it's these 3 characters, the actual value that I need to put inside my application, Great Plains, for example, it's going to be these words. Maybe you have a full word and that actually needs to be a setup code instead. The system will reject it if it's a full word. You could set up a translation table for those that text to convert those into your setup code. Maybe you have a situation where, depending on the data that's in that column, you may need to do something slightly different with that data. You may have several instances of differences of how that data is going to come in from the integrating application. Well, we can do that in the back end of SmartConnect so that the data ends up properly the way it should, the way the application expects for the application that you're integrating into. Another one of the really great automation features inside SmartConnect, and we see this used a lot, you can set up an integration to pull in from, say, an Excel spreadsheet or a text file, something being exported from a third-party system. Just drop those files into a folder, and SmartConnect will look at that folder, recognize that a file has been placed there, and then integrate that data according to whatever map is associated with that, that scanning of that folder. Really handy, really great tool. I mentioned briefly about transforming data. Here's some more examples of what we can do with the data transformation tools inside SmartConnect. And keep in mind, this is all without, most of this is all without writing any code, without having a developer, without having a super technical person. Once you understand how SmartConnect works, the average person can go in and do all of these things and maintain your own integrations without having to rely on a developer. So I already mentioned transforming text into other values. We can look into Great Plains or CRM or some SQL database somewhere, whether it's on-premise or if you have a connection to it out in the cloud somewhere, and you can look up data and return the field that needs to be, the field data that needs to be integrated into your application. So you may have data that's not necessarily, you don't really have a way to relate it to your, say, key field from the file or from the data source that you're integrating. Well, using the host of lookup tools inside SmartConnect, you can figure out what that data is supposed to be and update your maps so that the correct data goes to your application that you're integrating into. There is a robust programming language behind the scenes if you need to use it. It's based on Microsoft's .NET platform, which means that you can use either Visual Basic or something called C#. Beyond that, there are automation tools or transformation tools that require no coding at all. So you may put those together without having to write any code. Another one of the great features inside SmartConnect, in the old days, we used to have to write code to do this, and it was from within Integration Manager, it was a pain. It was very difficult to do this and do it well. But there's a couple clicks. You can tell the system to grab the next number for a Great Plains document number, like your next invoice number. You can set it up so that it creates your next customer number, or add some code to combine that with generating a customer number that doesn't auto increment. So gone are the days of having to make sure a customer code exists inside Great Plains before you try and integrate that data into the system, and then making sure that the data coming in with whatever file you're trying to integrate matches what you have in Great Plains. Greatly simplifies that process. One of the hot topics lately has been around something called web services. You may have heard it called REST services or API. An API stands for Application Programming Interface. That's a fancy word to say, I want to send something to the website and get some data back out. Wouldn't it be great if you could connect to Bamboo HR and download a list of employees so that they can be stored inside Great Plains for payroll processing? Well, using their API, you can create this inside SmartConnect. Any service that offers web services or REST services will allow you to build a full integration so that you can integrate into just about any other application. Again, we do a lot of Great Plains work, so I'm used to pulling data down from these applications and putting it into Great Plains. But once it's set up, it's all drag and drop. Again, this supports full scripting with .NET code, and you can build out an entire integration suite for any web-based solution that supports REST services or web services. So that really opens up the door to a host of other a host, I shouldn't say other, a host of applications that you can move data between. So let's just see how easy it is to integrate. We're going to take a spreadsheet that's got some customers, and we're going to build an integration from scratch and pull it into Great Plains. And then I'll show you the data inside Great Plains. So let me share my screen here. We're not trying to do anything too crazy, but I want to demonstrate how quick and easy it is to create some of these integrations. So here we have an Excel file. It's real simple. We've just got a customer ID, a name, and some simple address information. Make note of these three customer IDs, 1, 2, and 3. If we go into Great Plains, take a look at our customers, you'll see that our first customer starts with an A. There's no numbered customers here. So these customers definitely do not exist inside the Great Plains. So let's build this integration from scratch. I've opened up SmartConnect already. And you'll see here, there's nothing under data sources. There's nothing under integrations. I do have the Great Plains connection pre-configured just for this exercise, and it just points to my local instance of Great Plains. So I'm going to go in here first and create our data source. Remember earlier we said we need to source the data. So I'm just going to click on create. We're going to use Excel file for this example. If I go into bulk, you'd see all of these predefined connectors that we can use to create data sources. We've got customer engagement, which is Dynamics 365, the REST connectors that were referred to earlier, SQL Server, anything ODBC, Salesforce, and then web server services, and of course, Great Plains. And we can even go directly into Extender. If anyone's ever tried to pull data into Extender and associate it with an existing window, due to the dynamic nature of Extender, you know how difficult that can be. And you get that for free inside of SmartConnect. Seamless integration. It works great. But for this simple exercise, we're just going to create or enter this Excel file, which is called customers. Tell it we're using Excel 2019, the local file. Just going to look it up here. Is it from over here? We're going to tell it sheet 1. And if we preview this, you'll see we've got our 1, 2, 3 records and our address data that we looked at just a few minutes ago. So we have our data source. Now we need to tie this into an integration. So I'm going to go into here and create this. Give it a name, the description. We're going to use our file data source that we just created over there. You'll see it's listed here already. I'm going to tell it what I want to use for our key. In our case, it's going to be the customer ID. We preview, we can see it's this same data that we've been working with. And just like with our data sources, you can see all these predefined destinations that we have access to straight out of the gate, no additional downloading of extra tools or anything like that. Just they're already here, they're built into SmartConnect. In our case, we're going to go to Great Plains. And this is just my local install. This is the instance that I referred to over in my connections page. When I pull up the groups, you'll see that these are all the different Great Plains sections or the items that you tend to see on the menu. In our case, we're going to pull in customers, and that's part of receivables. Then under our node type, you can see all of these different types of what SmartConnect calls nodes. These are our data endpoints. And you can see these mirror the windows inside Great Plains. We've got our salespeople. We can create customers, customer classes. We can apply transactions. We can create receivables transactions. We can do voids. So just about anything you could do inside Great Plains, you can integrate using SmartConnect. So we're going to keep this simple. We're just going to go into customers, click on companies. We're just going to go into the Fabricam company. It's the only company I have set up. And we're going to double click down here on this line that says create update customer. Because we know these customers don't exist. We want to create them inside of Great Plains. So all we're going to do here on the left side, you see these are the columns from our data source. On the right side over here, these are all the fields where we could put data. This is all of the fields that exist for customers inside of Great Plains on the customer window. So we're going to create our customer number based on the ID from our file. We're going to give it a name, and you can see that all we're doing here is dragging and dropping into the appropriate columns just for the data that we want to pull in. To pull in the address, city, state. Zip's going to go to postal code. Oh, missed that one. I'm picking it up. There we go. Anyone who's used Great Plains, you'll know that GPL will complain if you don't have an address code for your address. This is one of these data transformations I referred to earlier. We can just enter constant data in. Just call this primary. And click OK. And we're pretty much good to go. Just going to click run. It's going to ask if we want to run the integration. Let's say yes. Boom. 3 records sourced, 3 records successful. If we had errors, they'd show up here in this big white area. Just going to click done here. Going to go back into Great Plains, pull up the customer card. If I search, here's our 1, 2, and 3 that weren't there before. I'll just scroll through here. You'll see that we have our customer ID, our name information, and the addresses that were defined inside of our Excel file. And that's it. There we go, integrating data between an Excel file and Great Plains, and from start to finish took us less than 10 minutes. So that's just a really small example of how powerful SmartConnect can be. And again, it's just integrating a simple file into Great Plains. Minimal effort. The average user can do that on their own. You can get as complicated as you want with the coding structure and lookups and logic inside SmartConnect. But for your day-to-day activities and importing data and integrating between third-party systems or local systems, it's a breeze. So that's pretty much it. Any questions before we finish up? We've still got a couple minutes left.
Well, thank you everyone again for attending Integrating Dynamics, SQL, and Other Systems with eOne SmartConnect. And thanks to Jim Griffin for sharing his knowledge on the subject. Again, we have our contact information. Please feel free to like and share our content. And we look forward to our next webinar coming at the end of October. So see you then.